want to talk a little bit about these 3A's. You may remember that after asking these questions, then we have to see how we're going to answer them. And we said, well, let's think of 3A's. One is awareness. Two had to do with analysis, which was impact assessments, basically. And the third was action. What can we do now that we see the problem? How do we act to effectuate a solution that we think, or a group of us think, should take place? And so awareness was really important. And you may remember in awareness, we said when we think of technology, we have to think of it in terms of its life cycle. Well, there were several examples we looked at. One happened to be electric energy generation, and we picked coal because it's so prevalent in use here in the part of the United States I live in. And we said, well, gee whiz, if we're going to look at electricity, and electricity requires coal, well, if we're going to deal with the life cycle here, we got to look at the coal. Well, how do we get the coal? What happens when we mine the coal? Who does it? What kind of effects does it have on their lives and the community around it? For example, we found out that coal miners have dangerous work. They have more sickness and a higher death rate than others. And we also discovered that in the mining of coal, if it's not done properly, why streams can become acidic because of the bacteria in the coal that's munching on the sulfur that's in the coal on a natural basis. We know that in coal mines there's methane, there's radioactivity because there's always some uranium and thorium in many coals. And so we had to think about that. We'd say, well, are there any ethical issues relative to the technology of coal mining and transporting that coal to where it's going to be used? Because that's kind of phase 1, point 1, first step in the technology of electric generation for coal. And so when we talk about impact, we got to talk about the coal miners. And the thing that was interesting in the class that I gave and just finished on this same topic, in reading commentary by the students in their assignments, some of them said, I never realized that there was so much sickness and danger in coal mining, and this is terrible. It's kind of like you go to the grocery store and you pick up your hamburger and you don't realize, you don't sit there and say, oh yes, there's hamburger. Well, let's see. There had to be a cow that was born, it had to be raised and fed, and veterinarians had to look at it, and somebody had to raise it. And they experience certain risks in the process, and then it has to be transported, it has to be butchered and all that, and what goes on in that particular line of work, and are there ethical issues there? And then it has to go to the store, and then the butcher gets it, and he grinds it up, and he puts it in the package, and we buy it. And then we eat it, and of course, after we eat it, there are certain pollution problems associated with that. And then if we're not careful how we handle it, we got health effects. So there's ethical issues in every step of the way. So awareness isn't just like, oh, I have a cell phone, or oh, gee, I have a computer, or I have a new artificial leg. The issue is, okay, how was that leg made? How was that phone made? Where'd the material come from? And we saw in cell phones, for example, there are parts of Africa where some of the raw materials that are used in that phone are acquired through slave use of children by warlords who use the profit to fight their wars. Well, is there an ethical problem with that? That's up to you, but I personally think there is. But corporations running under, its ethic, free private enterprise, capitalism, and they can say things like, well, hey, the paperwork I got said it's okay, that didn't happen. But they don't say, well, the guy lied writing the paperwork, or there was an under-the-table deal. I mean, there's all kinds of stuff going on, and there are ethical issues there. Besides just, I got a phone and all it can do and how it's affected social networking and my relationship with others and so on and so forth. And then when I dispose of it, where do the chemicals go? TVs went from big vacuum tubes and fluorescent screens and this and that, like to flat screens. Well, there was a huge amount of old cathode ray tubes that had to get disposed of. And, and there were certain chemicals in there that probably weren't good for the environment. And there were some opportunities for people who could reclaim those and put them back out on the market, those minerals and the like. So you got to think life cycle. And if you want to see how that happens, go to the EPA, Environmental Protection Agency's life site in the United States, and look at how they do their life cycle analysis relative to pollution. That'll give you a bit of an idea. Just to show you about awareness, I got a letter from a faculty person, Juan Pablo Franco from Columbia, and he's giving a course on robotics and one thing or another. And he wrote me an email. He asked this question last week in class. My students and I were talking about robotic ethics, roboethics, and a very interesting question came up. Is it possible that in the future humans and robots can generate relationships and establish families? Well, it's not out of the question. We love our dogs, we love our pets, and as a matter of fact, you can go out today, and the Japanese have a pet for somebody that's has dementia, and they pet the pet, and the pet responds, and they can be very happy with their robot. And there's already talk about robots helping to raise children and robots used in nursing homes taking care of the elderly. So, he made me aware of something, and it's through connections, through media, through whatever information resources are available to you to keep aware. And it's important because I thought, I never thought about that. So I responded and told them what I thought. So then there's the analysis part, and we said, well, for analysis, what we're going to do is look at social impact assessments and technology impact assessments. And that could occur back whether it was coal mining or transportation of the coal, the burning of the coal, the manufacture of the steam turbine that makes the electricity, siting of transmission lines, and the problem of high voltage lines going over your house. I mean, there's all that to consider, and there's ethical issues in each one of those. And you can't just say, well, I don't like it. Well, why? Well, just because I don't. That isn't going to get you anywhere. What you have to do is have some very cogent reasons, and impact analysis is one way to acquire those, because you go out and you use technical data, technical information to, I don't like using the word combat, but to contrast to the technology that is being promoted. And you want to have an effect on how it's used and how it's promoted. And then so then we got into the action aspect, and we said, well, how are we going to do that? Well, we're going to use the ideas of grassroots. We're going to getting a grassroots organization together, joining an NGO, a non-governmental organization, working with government, look at the technology diffusion into whether it's a corporation, a culture, or a governmental agency, whatever. We're going to look into that process and see where we can get in that process so we can have an effect on it. And that's the last part we looked at. So that's the importance of the 3 A's. The questions were out there. How do we answer those questions? Well, we get to that answer by looking at the 3 A's. And I'm going to spend some time with some challenges so that you'll know what should I be doing after I've had these 7 weeks together. So see you later. Bye for now.